So the Care Act applies to people who have disabilities, older people, people with mental health problems, learning disabilities, who struggle with day-to-day life. Could be anything from very practical things, getting out of bed, having a meal, having a wash, that sort of thing. But also people who struggle to get access to work, accessing the community, making friends, having a social life. Anyone that struggles with any of those things may be entitled to support under the Care Act. So when someone approaches the local authority for social care, the first approach is to have a conversation with the person about what their day-to-day needs are. And that could be a telephone conversation, a face-to-face visit, that sort of thing. Once those needs are identified, the local authority will try to find ways of meeting those needs with services that already exist in the community, day centres, voluntary services, etc. If that's not possible, then they may well get what's called a personal budget. So that is a pot of money, if you like, that is available to the individual to spend on the care services that they wish to have. So the project works with people with multiple and complex needs who are often socially excluded. And what we've found on this project is that people who are socially excluded are often excluded from getting social care support for various reasons. And what we're trying to do is break down those barriers and get the right kind of support available to people. So we're hoping that other projects might take a similar approach in breaking down the barriers between the voluntary sector and local authorities.
The Care Act changed previous legislation, which means people had to have significantly higher support needs to be eligible. So when they introduced the Care Act, they took into account that there was people like our client group that had needs but weren't necessarily bed-bound or terminally ill or severely disabled. So that legislation kind of opened up that they acknowledge that there is people out there do have needs and can't meet day-to-day living needs without support. I think there's not necessarily perceived as vulnerable, because people will say, well, they've managed on the street so they could manage in a home, or they've survived up until now is the same. I get a lot, but they've survived up until now, but surviving is not necessarily living a full life. And I think because a lot of our client group have either offending, drug and alcohol, but it's a lot of, well, no, they don't need it because they're fine. If they can go out and steal, then they can look after themselves, or they can leave the house to get drugs, so that means they could leave the house to access medical attention. It's not always necessarily the case. Survival is very different to living an everyday life.
So working with one lady in particular who had various mobility disabilities, she couldn't access the community, she couldn't even walk around her home properly. She relied heavily on the support of her husband. It was also an abusive and controlling relationship as well. So getting alternative support for this lady was really important to get back her independence, her confidence, and really move out of the clutches of her abuser, if you like. So I visited this lady and assessed her under the Care Act, decided that she was eligible, she met all the eligibility criteria. We referred her to adult social care, and our Care Act advocate that we have at the Law Centre attended an assessment with the lady's social worker from the local authority and negotiated her to get a personal budget. She now has a personal assistant, so that's where you employ your own carer, if you like, or support worker to help you with your day-to-day needs. And she can access the community now, she goes out, she has a social life, she even takes more care of herself as well, and she's been able to loosen the grip that her abusive partner has on her as well.
I think previously A lot of our client group got maintained by the voluntary sector, but as the voluntary sector loses money and their funding becomes very specific for certain things, then that's when it's been highlighted that maybe they're more of a social care need than what our agencies can give. Once that support kicks in from the local authority as part of a care package, it does mean that lots of the other agencies can take a step back anyway. So hopefully, as long as the care package continues, it will still stop the cycle of homelessness back into hostels, into the street and back around again, because they've got that constant support going in. So they've got someone to tell if suddenly they've not filled out the housing benefit forms or they're having issues with the neighbours. So hopefully a lot of that support they get from the care package will replace what they lose from different funded projects, because a lot of the people I work with have spent years bouncing between different funded projects. That funding ends, then they've got no support, so then they get the next project comes up and they get supported with that, and there's nothing that's been continuous for them. It does save a lot of money. It saves a lot of money in hostels, it saves a lot of money at drug and alcohol services, A&E admissions. When people are bouncing from service to service, they're costing everybody each individual money, but not actually getting any resolution, because they get a bit of support from one place, a bit of support from the other, and then things don't go well.
So what we feel we're doing is actually helping the local authority and making their job easier. We're finding people who need support where they are not finding them. We also feel that because we've got a good knowledge of services that exist in the community and can help meet people's needs before they approach the local authority, we're actually supporting them to carry out their prevention agenda. The benefit of having our support is that we're there to offer advice and guidance on the Care Act and other issues to our partner organisations. They wouldn't have this otherwise. It's often difficult to get advice from a local authority, but having a social worker in-house and employed within the project strengthens their ability to work with their participants effectively. So by the very nature of the people that we're working with, they would struggle to go and get the kind of help that they want and speak up and express their views. That's why we employ an advocate here to help them do that. The person can develop a good working relationship with the participants that we're working with in order to keep them engaged with the project and get them the right kind of support that they need. So what we find with people who are socially excluded or people with multiple and complex needs is that sometimes they can drift away from services, and we feel that having an advocate to develop a good working relationship with them, we can keep them engaged.
So Nottingham City Council have been very understanding of our client group, and myself, two other social workers within the city, the voluntary sector, are becoming approved assessors. So it means that we can do the assessments, so they're not having to be assessed twice, they're not having to tell the story twice, and hopefully mean that they get a service quicker and more effectively, and we could probably tell them more information about the person we work with than they would get from popping round to do an assessment, because a lot of them have been known to our services for years. They talk to us more, we've got probably a bit more time, we can spend more time with them to get that information, because they have to give out their information lots and lots of times. So a lot of the time you start asking them things, they're just like, no. So Nottingham City have been very good.
I'd like to see other voluntary sector projects taking the same approach that we have in order to get people access to social care support. And ultimately, I'd like local authorities to recognise the value and the wealth of experience that the voluntary sector has with people with multiple and complex needs.